Hello, everybody. We finally made it back, haven't we, mate?
It's been a minute, but we're all good.
Yeah, lots has been going on, so we haven't had a chance to get any recordings going, and we are finally back to that point where we can start recording and getting a few shows out. So, how's
Yes,
things been
well,
with you?
quite good. There's been a lot that's happened since our last show that we had. I'm now a dad.
Yes,
Uh, yes, that's
that,
well,
that that's part of the reason why we've sort of put it on hold for a bit because new daddy duties took precedent for a bit.
so no, that's good. It's going good. It's
Yeah,
happy. I'm
and
happy.
we're actually tonight we're going to do things a little bit different. We're going to bring in a couple of guys from WAPR with us as well, so a couple of more of our team members, and we're going to have a little bit of a roundtable discussion. So it's a bit different for us, isn't it?
Yeah, try something new approach, new year coming up. So why not try something different?
Coming up, yeah, so we're jumping the gun a bit, but whatever. Anyway, so we'll bring our new guys in. Well, they're not new, but they're new to podcasting, so this will be an interesting show to say the least. So if everybody minds saying hello to James and to Karen, not that they will hear you, but hello guys, how are you?
Hi there. How you going?
Hello.
Fresh
We're good.
Oh, she's gone all
Good
wobbly.
here.
So what are we all going to talk about tonight? Does somebody want to make that little introduction?
Yeah, well, urban legends.
That's right, we are revisiting that one. So
Yes, the first time we did that was a bit atrocious.
It-
Well, it wasn't atrocious as such. It was more of a comedic relief.
it was just to fill everybody in. That was our first ever podcast, and we set out to record for an hour, and then we did that. But once we played it back, and the swear words, the big gaps, the laughing, the giggling, by the time we cut all of that out, we were down to about 28 minutes, and that's the one that's up on the air at the moment, somewhere in cyberspace, isn't it?
Unfortunately, yes.
There is a video to go with that, but we didn't actually put the video up, so we're going to revisit the urban legends and see if we can't actually get a whole hour without any swearing, giggling, or cracking up. I
Cannot
seriously
promise
doubt
my
it. See, so we've already failed.
Right.
But yeah, so urban legends. Everybody knows what an urban legend is. The thing is, nobody knows usually where fact and fiction meet, whether it's all fact, it's all fiction, or somewhere in the middle, which a lot of urban legends, they sort of do have bits that are based on reality, real events and things like that. And then there are others which are just total fiction, but they've been so sewn into society that people can't tell what's real and what's not. And I don't know if that's a bit of a thing about how society is going these days, but yeah, so we'll take it from there. So yeah, with urban legends, a lot of it can be based in reality, very loosely, and then from there, the word of mouth, and then one person tells another one, and then somebody takes it down a dark path, and before you know it, you've got this full-blown story which nobody knows where reality finishes and where myth takes over. Yeah, so we're talking about Lake Lanier. Now, originally back in the 1940s, there were a number of towns through the valley, and what happened was they wanted to make a man-made lake, so they ended up buying up all of the towns and everything, waiting on the congressional approval for it to go through, which in the mid-40s they got that. Now, rather than actually delete, remove, demolish all of the buildings and all the houses and things like that, they just decided to let the floodwaters go and fill up. So at the bottom of Lake Lanier, there are several small towns and several cemeteries that weren't exhumed at the bottom of the lake. Now, that is fact. So that part is fact. But where it takes on an urban sort of legend feel is that people get eerie feelings when they go to the lake. Sometimes people who are swimming will feel legs, arms, body parts around them, and they actually feel like they're being grabbed and pulled underwater. So that's where the urban legend takes, are they actually experiencing something real? Is it just somebody telling stories? That's where it all grows. So that's where urban legends start. So I thought we'd go through a few. So if Jeremy wants to take on the first one.
Oh, I suppose I can. And I'd like to start one off that with a question, saying, "Do you know the Muffin Man?" um, in a history, sort of 15th century, there was who they call the Muffin Man, or the Drury Lane Dicer. Not as friendly as what the kids' nursery rhyme is. There it is already. It's said to be between 1589 and 1598 that Frederick Thomas Linwood was the Muffin Man. He has been known to kill several bakers and about 15 children. In that sense, he was luring children in with muffins on strings into dark alleyways. The song, or the nursery rhyme, "The Muffin Man," was written to help children warn other children about the Muffin Man taking children into the lane and killing them. His favourite murder weapon, or the weapon of choice, was a sharpened wooden spoon. I don't know. Don't know what would possess someone to try and take people out with a wooden spoon that's been sharpened, but I'm sure there's other ways you could be doing it.
So I wouldn't even know where to start with that one because everybody gets taught that as a little kid, and they don't realise the true history behind it all, or the mythology behind it all.
Yeah, like Ring Around the Rosie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Full of posies. That wasn't a nice song to start off with.
Well,
I wonder if the muffin.
Strange.
Does anybody know the movie The Demon Butcher of Baker Street? I think it is.
No.
no.
I wonder if that's sort of linked into that sort of genre.
In saying that, there was a movie made about this as well. I think it was a Tom Cruise movie off the top of my head, called The Drury Lane Dicer.
Okay.
I haven't watched it myself yet. I've not long found out about this. So it's something I will be looking at myself at some stage.
Well,
So did they have records of it anywhere, Jeremy?
Well, that's the thing, that there's no records. There's no, from what I can find, there's not much at all. It's hearsay. It's word of mouth. I suppose like the Loch Ness Monster sort of idea, if you go into urban legends in that way.
well, that's another urban legend all in itself. You know.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's just weird that there's no documentation for it, but yet there's dates and there's a person's name, and it's a legitimate person. Born in 1563 and he died in 1612.
And this is the other thing as well. If you go back that far, they weren't as accurate as what we are now with recording, information and stuff. So,
And that's pre-Victorian.
It begs to begs the question: what really did happen, and how was it recorded?
Were other people killed besides kids? Like, did he start with someone else, older people?
It's not saying that he started with anyone such. That it's just saying there was up to 22 people, all up. I think 15 of them were children, and 7 of them were rival other pastry chefs or bakers.
Yeah. But don't want to sound funny, but being a serial killer, they all get like a niche as to what they want to, how they do it.
I'd say with the numbers, I'd say it'd be children was niche.
Yeah. But they will have to start somewhere, right?
I suppose it makes it easier being a pastry shop or a muffin man, and you're making sweets that kids will eat. There was some sort of record about his incarceration, but how true it is, I don't know. Some say that he was given a slap on the wrist after the king's orders, and then he was pummeled by an angry mob after he left. Still, there's just hearsay. There's no exact, accurate documentation.
See, my question with that is, going back that far, what sort of pastries was he putting out there to attract all of these kids? I need to know these kind of facts. What was he making?
It's a bit nice. Well, I'd say muffins.
Sweet muffins.
I don't know. I know in his... Oh, I don't know, but in the supposed later years of himself, he was suffering from dementia and was making pastries that they would fill with arsenic and steroids, which I don't think steroids were even invented back then, which is kind of a fork in the works there, because it's like, well, hang on, you're writing one thing and you're talking about, pre-Victorian history. Like, I don't think they would have steroids.
Yeah, I wonder if it went a bit darker and maybe cooked some of his victims.
I don't think he's a Sweeney
Who
Todd.
knows?
It could be. Who knows?
Well,
Um,
we don't know. We don't know.
Well, one thing, I would love to know where people are getting this information from. I've searched several sites, and it's all the same sort of thing that's being said. Like his death, years after being punished by a angry mob, it was said that he was trying to squish a cockroach with his fork, got his hand and chucked it on a dumpling that he was eating.
That's pretty specific.
Exactly. So, you go from this, we don't know if he was a murderer, we don't know if he was England's first serial killer, but we know that he choked on a dumpling.
See, and this is one of the things about urban legends. Depending on where you go, the little facts, the little nuances of each story change to suit the locale. Take, for instance, when I was a kid, I grew up in England, and I used to go on these adventure holidays where you go out to the Lake District with a whole group of other kids, and they had like camp people, a bit like the summer camp films that you see in England. There was a lake and all of that sort of stuff. But I remember we did go out camping, and for some unknown reason, they separated the boys from the girls. So the girls got to stay out in the tents outside, the guys all being, rough and tough, and, we're manly boys of 12 years old, whatever it was. We all decided we were going to sleep in the haunted cave, because before it was time for everybody to bed down for the night, we did the whole campfire, and they started telling all of these ghost stories, and that was my introduction to the urban legends. And we actually stayed in the end. We wouldn't go much further than the entrance to this cave, because it's known that this ghost miner walks around, and unbeknownst to us, there was another little entry in, and one of the camp guys about 2 o'clock in the morning decided to walk that way, and we just heard these rocks come down and absolutely scared the shit out of us. And that was our introduction to urban legends. And at that age, you take in so many facts, but so many facts as you retell a story can change sometimes. Not intentionally, but that's how it works, I guess. And then if you're somewhere else, they'll then pass on a story to somebody, and the facts will change to suit where they are. See, a lot of the facts when I grew up as a kid and had these holidays in the Lake District just don't apply here in Australia. They're just totally different. But one that I was told was on this night was about the young couple that were out driving, looking for a nice secluded little spot in the woods where they can have a little bit of fun in the back seat, if you know what I mean. And what happened was they'd finished, they were getting ready to head home, and the car died. And this is, I can't remember what forest they said it was, but different stories have different forest names, so I don't know if there was any fact to this or if it's just total myth. But what happened was the car had stopped, they'd run out of petrol, and it was one of those creepy kind of nights. And the guy, being a guy, turned around and said, well, I want you to stay in the car. I don't want you to come with me just in case there's any dodgy stuff going on. Stay in the car, keep the doors locked. It was a cool night. Now, there was a petrol station a few miles away. Now, I don't know what time of the night this was supposed to be, because back then I don't think petrol stations were open all night, so that sort of leads it in one direction. But what happened was he was gone for maybe an hour, and she'd sort of fallen asleep in the back seat, and she woke up to this, like the car shaking and a bit of a thud on the roof. She thought the wind had got up, and then something had just, a branch had come off the tree, landed on the roof or something like that, because she was asleep. But what happened next is where this takes on a slightly more scary undertone. She couldn't see much because when she'd fallen asleep, all the windows were sort of fogged up because it was a cold night. And then there was this big, massive bang on the roof. And she was a bit freaked out, you know. She was trying to have a look, wipe down the windows to see what she could see through. Couldn't see anything. And then the car would shake, and then there'd be all mighty smashing. She'd actually hear the roof crumbling in, and she was absolutely freaking out. Anyway, she was just hoping that her boyfriend would come back, and it didn't happen. It was getting close. You know, the first sort of light of the morning was coming, and a car sort of pulled up in front. She saw the headlights, and she was able to wipe enough, but she was freaked out and shaking and everything at this point. And she noticed that there was a little thing on the top with a little blue bubble. It was a police car, and this guy sort of come out, and I don't think they had guns back then, the cops in England. He just had a truncheon kind of thing, and there was two of them. They were walking up very gingerly, and they could see her in the car. And what happened was, they said to her, the motion for her to come out, and she cracked the window down a little bit, and she said, what's going on, and they said, look, we want you to get out, keep your head down, come towards us, and no matter what you hear, we don't want you to turn around. So what happens, she finally gets the courage up, opens the door, and then she starts to run towards them. The banging starts hammering again on the roof, and she just stopped and she looked around, and on the roof was this psycho with this big branch, and her boyfriend's head impaled on the branch, and it been smashing the head on the roof all night. It was her boyfriend's head that was being smashed, and that's what she was hearing. And it turns out that an escaped lunatic had got away from the asylum a few miles away, and he'd come across the boyfriend, killed him, severed the head, which I don't know how he would do that. But as a kid, that story scared the ever-loving crap out of you. And there are stories that of escaped lunatics and things like that happening. Maybe not the end result of what happening, but certainly encounters with people, you know, when they've escaped. So that was one of those things where it could happen. It's very possibly it didn't, but lots of the details change. I've heard it probably 5 or 6 times since then, and little parts of the story change each time. So I don't know how many times it had changed before I heard it. So nobody knows what the reality or where it all began, but yeah, it certainly had an effect on me as a young bloke. I mean, there were several others as well that I heard, but that's the big one that stuck in my head.
Yeah, I've heard similar stories. One of the little differences was that the guy had his head on a chain with a big hook through it. Another one is that the girl was able to start the car up, and as she drove off, the chain hooked around the door handle and ripped the psycho's hand off. And then, you know, small little details which gets changed, obviously, through like Chinese whispers of the story or whatever, or, you know, whoever's telling it tells it slightly different to the next person.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely has to come from somewhere.
Oh, exactly. And we actually talked about this when I was at school, in I think one of our English classes, about urban legends and things like that, and how things can change from one person telling another person and stuff like that. And we actually did this exercise where the teacher wrote a simple little phrase of about 4 or 5 words, and we were all in a big circle, and she gave the first person that, and they had to whisper it to the next person, and the next person had to change just one word, you know. And then by the time it got round to the other side, we got to hear what it was, and then they actually held up the little bit of paper to show what it started out as. And it just goes to show, mate, things can change so much.
Yeah.
It's to suit the audience. Gets changed to suit the audience. I mean, those sorts of stories where it's you know, young couples going into places and doing the nasty, then it's put out there so it might stop them going, so if they fear where they're going to park up in Lovers Lane or wherever it might be, given to that, addressing 14, 15-year-olds and things like that, so they don't go. There's that fear, and especially in a girl's mind, to go into the dark places and the unknown, and be aware of it. And yeah, that, as I said, it just suits who the audience is, where it grows, and what they're going to add to it. So you'll get different parents will add something in, different school groups, different camp groups. So they all get added and changed to suit the time and the journey or the story that they're going to.
Exactly. And like you were saying, when you start talking about Lovers Lane and things like that, there are so many urban legends that tie into Lovers Lane and young couples and, finding a little dark spot to have a bit of fun. And I think a lot of it is started by dads that don't want.
I have no problems doing that,
Jeremy, remember that story?
We're already my daughter's already she's grown up and everything there, but Jeremy's daughter, we're already preparing our urban legends for when she brings the first boy home.
It's not even the urban legends I'm worried about. It's everyone else.
It's the real one, isn't it? Yeah. But they've got to keep it real. When the stories keep going through, time and decades, it's got to be kept with that generation of people they're telling it to. So what you and I might have been more frightened of what our parents said or whatever, they're not going to be now. So you have to throw in something that's generational as well to keep it going if you want to make it, last a bit longer. So that's where the changes will come, because there'll be new technologies they can throw in and make it scarier or more purposeful. So I think it's keeping it going, isn't it?
Yeah, and another thing with that as well is we talk about, what were the facts when it started, and then how did it get to what it's doing now. Then what you've got to do is you start thinking about things like what happens to the people that decide we're going to do that based on what they've heard. So what might start out as a little bit of very loosely based fact turns into a mythology, and then you get, they'd have to be a little bit unhinged, I guess, but they then take what they've heard and then they turn it into fact. So that blurs everything even more, because then that is actual fact based off myth, which may have been based off fact, and it just enhances the whole urban legend thing.
It's like what James was saying before with that one with the chain and the hook. I actually spoke to Gary about that one. I think the first podcast we did, which was the Hook Man.
Yeah.
And that's the one I had heard as well. But like you say, they get changed for other people to absorb that information. Like, I suppose these days you could throw in there like, oh, it happened at Nangara Pines, or you could make it like that. Hey, there's probably bodies out. Well, there is bodies out there, surely, but you could do that enough to scare someone. Like, it's just to keep them out of harm's way, I suppose, by scaring the living. Well, I can't say that word. Out of your kid.
But they all stem from something. So whatever that something was, be it fables or lessons learned, like a lot of them are. And there's the one that I've got for the Slender Man. I mean, that comes from today's generations and the technologies of things. But like you were saying, Gary, that certain people take that for real, and that's where it stems from more of what I'm looking at. So they go way back. They all have snippets through Christianity, from pagan, from all sorts of things that have then been adapted to suit what we want to hear, what suits us out of it to take from that story. So there is a lot out there. There's a lot out there.
So with you mentioning the Slender Man, do you want to go into that little urban legend for us?
I'll have a go. I'm getting a bit more confident here. As you can tell, I'm chatting. So I didn't know about this myself, and will lead into where it came to be known to me. But in 2009, I believe that there was a gentleman that entered a photography competition or photographic competition for what was then a paranormal photographs. They had to submit what could be going into this competition, and he entered this particular picture. But what got his notoriety in it was he put captions of news articles and things that substantiated or made a story that made it seem somewhat believable, because it went out on the internet onto this paranormal website. So it gained traction, and by 2012, people were adding their own snippets to it. And by 11, and then 2012 it became an online gaming. But in there, the description of him changes. He is still this man that is supposedly over 8 foot tall, slender build, no facial features, wearing a hat, but he's an abstract male image. You can see he's male, but it's blurred, but he's supposed to be male. And he doesn't actually do any killings to any himself. He gathers in people to do that, and he leads them, like in mind games, to do the killings for him. And from that, there was in 2014 people that actually did act out and say that they were working for him as a prodigy. But in the game of things, or the mind melding, he relied on children and drew children in and played on their emotions and their lacking. And he wasn't scary to them, but he offered them some sort of comfort. And in doing that comfort, he then got them to carry out his deeds at his wills, which weren't very nice. And he tended to live in forests. So from that, or on the outsides, and behaving like I don't know, like the fantasy played to children of fairies and imps and all that sort of thing, the mystical part of it. So he didn't scare them, he didn't frighten them, but he offered something that then turned them negative. So,
have you seen the film? What is it? The Conjuring 2, I think, the one based on the Enfield Poltergeist. They actually go into something very similar in that. A tall, skinny, very skinny, creepy person, and it makes you wonder again where people pick it up and take it to the next level.
Well, was it this goes back. I did see where they were saying it was based on a lot of some sort of snippets of folklore from like Germany. So to stop the children going into the forests, they made up this spooky man, like we all do, the boogeyman. So was it stemming from that? And when this guy did the image, because the photo, I believe, was taken of this man or image in a forest setting between two trees. So was it that? And then they, added other sections in there to stop children. It was to make them fearful of wandering off on their own, because somebody would go and get them or take them away. Who was there waiting. So I tend to think that that sort of thing. I spoke to some friends of mine who are from Singapore, and I'm not going to say I remember that he said he saw it, or the legend is very similar in Singapore when he was growing up, that it was a stick-like figure, and that it used to call to the children, and they would then go between his legs and hide, and then he would close and trap them behind his legs, and they were never seen again. And that's somewhat like the story of the Slender Man. When children were missing, they would blame it on the Slender Man. So was it a cover-up for somebody else carrying out deeds, and use this image or the legend of him to have people go off and look for him, or to take children away, or unexplained reasons why people disappeared. But I just thought he was interesting, because am I allowed to say that I believe I saw him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I believe it was on one of our investigations as well, wasn't it?
I can attest to
Yes,
that.
it was. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I've never heard of him in the games or any otherwise. But yes, on our investigation that we were doing, there was a certain point where there was this shadowy image at the top of the bell tower, but didn't think much of it. And it wasn't till Jeremy and I were actually in a church, and I was at the altar, and I went to talk to Jeremy, and this image of it was just a shadow. I was going to say Shadow Man when I first saw it, but it didn't appear like that. It was just the tallest thing. It outshone Jeremy, so it was taller than him. So, and the moment I saw him in the legend, it says that they can teleport. You don't actually see them move; they just there. And I saw it at the entrance of the church. And as I was trying to focus, the next thing I know, it was right in front of me, standing. I guess you'd say it's the altar, but it didn't come up. It just looked at me, but it had no face. There was no imagery of face. And so, and I just looked. It didn't frighten me. I just looked at it, and then it disappeared. And I said to Jeremy, and I was trying to describe it, and I was going through and what I thought it was, like that cartoon character, the Gumby Bear, that plasticine man that moves. And that's what I was trying to describe it as, because I couldn't think. And so Jeremy, I was going through all these things describing it, and Jeremy just goes, "That's the Slender Man." And as soon as he said it, my little spidey senses stopped. I was satisfied, and I knew that's what I'd seen. So, and when you read about the Slender Man or whatever, what he does, also in there that he likes to burn things. He likes to things burnt. Now, at this particular place, I do like and think it should be burnt to the ground. I'm not actually big on fires, but this place definitely makes me want to be burnt to the ground. So, did I get an influence by that? Don't know. But also, several buildings in this place have been burnt.
Yeah.
So, and it was an institution with children. So, did they draw enough energy that was happening in that environment to create that urban legend to turn up? Did they create him?
Well,
Did they bring him?
that's another one of the things that everybody talks about, and that is manifestation and the power
Yeah.
behind that. You know, if enough people believe something is real, do they actually manifest it into reality?
There was studies done on it, and it was a positive answer that they got.
Yeah.
I'll have to find the link for it.
I thought
But
it would be like a residual in there, to draw him out. Because, I mean, it wasn't us. There'd be no reason we would see him. So the circumstances or during, that investigation would lead me to think, because, I mean, I could see children that were there. So did they bring him out? Did we get to see what they had, from the fear of that place? Because reading up a lot more of the bits and pieces, and I truly believe for myself anyway, was why he was there. That was a will of bringing him in. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, what you were saying earlier as well was how you said you were seeing the kids around. Now we all experienced the child spirits in that place. I think that was undeniable. We have documented things happening, which we've got on video, we've got photos, things like that. But what you were saying earlier is about how he would trick them into doing their bidding for him, his bidding, So are they all part of the same thing? He's there, they're there. It makes you wonder. So, James has been trying to talk, so we better let James talk.
Sorry, James.
That's okay. No, all good, all good. I was just having just popped into my brain when you were describing how he used to do something. Sounds similar to like the Pied Piper, calling the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's the Pied Piper has a bit of the Slender Man basis to it, but they've made it a little bit more child friendly because they don't make it too scary for the child.
That was supposed to be in Hamlin or somewhere like that, where that happened.
Yeah,
the
Pied Piper of Hamlin.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if that's like
the
basis of the urban legend.
Possibly.
Well,
touching back on what Karen was saying about people trying to copy things and kill people, I was actually on the forums at the time that the Slenderman photos were released. I think it was back in 2009 on Something Awful. They also, not long after that, released saying, please do not kill anybody, and saying the Slenderman has actually told you to do it, because there was two 12-year-old girls that attempted to kill one of their friends to appease the Slenderman.
I remember
that.
Yeah, because that was in He took her into a forest
Yeah, that was
there,
in Wisconsin.
and there was about 3 or 4 other attempted ones that they will put down to, or saying, yeah, they were called, called by him, or asked to do it for him, sort of thing. That he appeared, and that was it. But that's that where the manifestation of him is, the computer technology. So that generated through our lot. My boys knew about it, and I certainly didn't know they were playing the game, the online game. But where we saw him was way before, computer technology. So they would have no knowledge of that, if it's that particular thing, if it's come from computers. So I don't know where that one sprung from, but I'm certainly, as I said, I had no knowledge of what he looked like or anything like that. And when as soon as I said Slender Man, or Jeremy said it, everything just went silent for me. So I knew that was, a pretty good call for whoever the Slender Man was. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
I also
James, go on.
remember. Sorry, I also remember a YouTube. It wasn't a clip or anything. It was just like a 911 recorded call, whether it was faked or not true. But you hear a kid calling up 911 saying there's a strange man standing outside in the woods, and they just describe someone that looks like the Slender Man, and they're saying they're calling his sister out first. Did anybody else see that or hear
no,
that?
I haven't seen that
No,
one.
but when you're talking about that, I was actually looking into. I was looking through some videos earlier today, and I found this video which, again, it's all about new technology and stuff like that. The Ring doorbell, which is a video doorbell,
Yeah.
and we've got one. I've got one here. I've got security cameras and all that kind of stuff around. But this one actually goes into the creepiest footage ever found on these Ring cameras and things like that. And some of the things that I saw today, I would never have believed, and they actually tie into some of the things that you're talking about, as in they've seen things, but these cameras have actually picked them up. And while in the cameras they're actual real people, the weirdness of them. I mean, there was one with this guy that was trying to get into the house. Now he had to have been at least 6.5, 7 foot tall, and no more than about 50 kilos. He was skinny. He is your atypical slender man kind of thing, and
Hey,
it makes you wonder, you know, where boundaries start to
hey,
get crossed.
Yeah,
hey.
definitely.
Well, I mean, I've seen the Shadow Man, and this was, as I said, when we saw the image up in the bell tower, I would have said Shadow Man, just the dark figures. But when this was just, only 2 foot away from me, sort of thing, uh, I don't know, no face, no nothing, but there, you just knew, and that you're totally different to a Shadow Man, and had no presence, if you know what I mean. There wasn't anything emanating from him other than him being there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All
what
right,
he was doing in that place, don't know.
James, you have the floor for a little bit, mate.
Yeah, cool. So mine is about Bloody Mary. So we all have heard about the Bloody Mary, the urban legend, the phantom, conjured spirit, whatever you want to call it, be it benign or malevolent, depends on historical variation and beliefs, right? So we're looking. It steps back to about 1700s, is as far as I can go back. But getting stuff from the 1700s is pretty hard to get factual evidence, right? We all know the current version of her. You're sitting in a darkened room with a candle and a mirror, and you say her number 3 times or more, and she's supposed to appear to you as either a lady with blood on her face. There's so many different versions that have come out. There's some that say she looks pretty and she tries to take your soul, blah blah, all that type of stuff going forward. But back in the late 20th century, it was believed that if a female walked backwards upstairs while holding a hand mirror with a candle in a darkened house, and she called Bloody Mary 3 times, that they would see their future husband. And if they didn't see the future husband, they would see a skeleton or the Grim Reaper. So the Grim Reaper could possibly be converted into Bloody Mary herself, right? And then she would take your life, or you would be married, you would die before you got married. So um, that is one. Now we all in this room believe that mirrors are gateways to different dimensions, and spirits can sometimes contact us through them. So there is some supporting evidence for maybe a Bloody Mary type entity in a different dimension coming forward to scare people. Generally, I'm led to believe she won't show herself for one person, but she will show herself for a group of people. There's also evidence that she has showed herself to single people, and obviously they don't live to tell the tale, so you don't know if that's true or not. There is some lore as to there's possibly 4 people who Bloody Mary could be, and I think most of them start with the name Mary. The first one is Mary the First of England. She killed probably around 300 people, claiming they're witches. So she got the nickname Bloody Mary. And it's
I've
killing
heard
300
that. I've heard that.
That's
Yeah.
why you say 3 times, say her name 3 times. Then there's Elizabeth Bathory of the 17th century.
I've heard that name as well.
Yeah, so she killed around 650. She killed around 650 girls, and she was accused of being a vampire because she used to also bathe in their blood. So hence the name Bloody Mary. Glad I don't have a mirror because I'm going to say it 2 more times.
Glasses are mirrored.
Sorry?
Glasses are mirrored.
Yeah, that's true. Don't say that. The third lady's Mary Worth. Now, she was just killing slaves by the Underground Railroad, which is all an American history. If you've ever watched
to do with getting the slaves out.
Yeah, correct. So if you've ever actually watched Abraham Lincoln Vampire Killer, they actually have a lot of that Underground Railroad talk and like slaves being killed and things like that. Not saying that that's a real thing, but who knows?
It's not an actual railway. It's
yeah, no, I know it's not a railway. It's a pathway.
It's a number of houses. And there's a set way
Yeah.
that they would do to get the slaves out, and I think up to the north,
that's right.
so that they could live a
So
free
if you
life.
can, get away from the whole vampiric nature of the movie, you actually get some quite good historical references in that movie.
It's fun.
I like it.
Yeah, it's
But
funny
my
how
wife
you
hates it.
mentioned as well. You mentioned about going up the steps backwards and
Yeah.
saying that, and then you would meet somebody who would tell you who your future husband was or whatever. There's actually an urban legend out of where was it? Indiana in America. There's a certain cemetery out there, which, funnily enough, nobody can actually. It's that old that nobody can actually pinpoint a specific address for it. It's a bit of a walk to get to. It's in the middle of nowhere. Now, what the legend says there's actually 100 steps, I'm assuming stepping stones, and the idea is you walk all the way up them, and on each step you count as you go, so 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 100. When you get to the 100th step, apparently when you look up, you will meet the Grim Reaper, and he will tell you the day you die, how you die, and that kind of information. Now, at that point, you're supposed to put your head back down. You're supposed to walk back through the steps backwards, counting back down to 1. Then you can turn around and go about your life. Now, it's been reported there that people who have either tried to avoid it by jumping off the steps have met very unfortunate ends very quickly, or people that miscalculate going backwards have actually felt something physically shove them off the steps. So there's similarities there to what you were saying about the one of the many Bloody Mary versions. So it just goes to show that a lot of them may even tie into each other.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be interesting to find out the reasoning behind steps as well and going backwards, because I've read that for a few other things, actually walking backwards. And when you do cleansing in houses and things like that, well, for me, I've been told it's going anti-clockwise, so more in the backwards direction. So there must have some merit. So I'll have to look up why.
I don't know what that's all about, but it's apparently close to a town called Brazil in Indiana. But they can't give you a specific address or a GPS coordinate so you can get there. So it's around somewhere. So they call it the 100 Step Cemetery. that itself could very possibly be an urban legend in its own right, let alone what happens when you do find it.
Do you know why they cover mirrors? I just realised is that part of it, covering mirrors when somebody passes away in mirrors. Is it so that the soul can travel out? If it gets sees the light of a mirror, it could go the wrong way. So it could go into the mirror and get stuck. That's how they say they get images and people stuck in mirrors.
Yeah.
So that's why they cover mirrors in the period of mourning, so that the soul gets to travel the right way. So Bloody Mary might have got stuck in there.
If that's the case, then does that tie into other nursery rhymes of fairy tales and princess
Yep.
stories for other people?
Yeah.
Mirror on the wall.
Mirror on the wall.
Yep. She's stuck in there. Got stuck.
Yeah.
Well, don't have any mirrors.
That brings credence to mirrors being a pathway to a different dimension as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then how is it 7 years they luckily break a mirror?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I did read that.
See, you're talking about like nursery rhymes and things like that, and then obviously talking about these stories. What you gather from most of these urban legends that they're all sort of cautionary tales, basically warning people against doing certain behaviours and things like that. And then you go back so far, you get into nursery rhymes, which they're almost priming you for it at that early age. And then you look at things like the Brothers Grimm and all their fairy tales. I'm talking about fairy tales.
Yeah.
How much of them are like urban legend as well? Because a lot of those stories were nowhere near as nice as what they make out when they get into the little children's books.
Nope.
It's extremely funny you say that, because I spent about 45 minutes to an hour and a half on the phone speaking to Karen today about the exact same thing.
Same thing.
Word for word. Brothers Grimm, fairy tales,
Tales.
what's an urban legend, what fairy tales were urban legends,
Yeah.
to the fact of Peter Pan.
Peter Pan. Oh yeah. Nice.
That's one there. Like you read it and it's like, wow, like this is pretty full on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got Hansel and Gretel as well, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's what they're saying. Is the Muffin Man is the story from Hansel and Gretel is a descendant from the Muffin Man, supposedly.
Yeah.
But
That's
it's like,
scary.
How many, like with Pinocchio, the backstory of Pinocchio, it's got nothing to do with a carpenter making a boy, a puppet to turn into a boy. It was conditioning kids, saying that before parenting had come in and good parenting come in, that this puppet was a really bad, evil child. These children were evil. And they showed with that puppet that beating a puppet this way, hanging a puppet this way, torturing a puppet was all conditioning to have children act a certain way, because they thought that the children were spawn of demons, or the devil, I should say. But it's like, and now you look at it, it's like it's a puppet that wants to be a real boy. It's like, how much conditioning do they want to put people through before they go, oh well, what's the go?
That's what I'm saying. They water these things down from very dark and very graphic stories into little, very happy chappy sort of kiddie little,
Well, look
things. Everyone's got the little golden books on the shelf somewhere from when their kids were little. All of these stories that are all sweet and innocent, and the kids love them. When they get a bit older and find out what the true origin of these stories are, it's a completely different set of books you've got then.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh,
Yeah,
like I
come
said,
on.
you're okay.
Sorry, I said it gives some sort of credence to why a lot of things are sort of going PC these days, but because it's starting to come out where they all originated from. But you still like to sort of think of some of them in the innocence in which they were told to your kids or read to your kids, but a lot of them, have really nasty origins, backgrounds,
Yeah,
story.
and you got to remember as well, it's a sign of the times. Back then, they used to write books, or they'd tell stories and hand those stories down. So they change and change and change, and you end up with these urban legends, fairy tales, all of these kind of things. In this day and age, that sort of giving way to more visual things like movies and things like that. Take, for instance, the Wolf Creek movies. They are fiction, but they are very loosely based on Ivan Milat and a lot of those backpacker killings and things. And I think movies are going to be the next the next sort of generation of urban legends. I mean, there are films out there called Urban Legend, and you know, all those. I Know What You Did Last Summer. All those kind of things. They're the beginnings of the next level of urban legends, because
Storytelling.
yeah, well, like what we were saying before, if enough people get into it, can they actually manifest something like that? You know, I'm a true believer that if you go back 300 or 400 years, there was a lot more magic in the world than there is now. You know, not magic in as abracadabra and things like that, but there was a lot more to the world than what there is now. I look back from when I was a kid to where I am now. Yes, I've learnt a hell of a lot of life experience and things like that, but simple things like when I was at school, you learnt long division and all of that kind of stuff. You used to be able to write it for ages, keep going down, and used to love that stuff. But in this day and age where we've got calculators, we've all got smartphones, even spell check is taking care of people with bad grammar and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So are we actually dumbing ourselves down to a level of stupidity, ultimately?
100% they are. It's easier to control people when they're dumb.
Which then goes into a whole other show about the New World Order and all of those kind of things, which...
That's what I mean. Could you have conspiracy theories dumbed down into urban legends?
Yeah. Is everybody talks? Well, not everybody, but
conspiracy theories, the 20th century urban legends.
That's where I was just about to go with that. Things like everybody knows about. Well, in our field, they know about the shadow governments that are running the world and stuff. Oh, microphone's gone quiet. But are they urban legends, or are they? You know, we start talking about some of these very rich families, which I'm not going to name because I don't want to get in trouble. But how much do they actually rule? Because I mean, you look at countries now. Countries aren't countries anymore. They're just different financial institutions, and you know, the governments don't really run them. The banks run them, and these multi-billion trillionaires, they're the ones with all the real power.
Where's the World Bank? Never seen it in my life.
Does it exist?
Well, that's another myth, isn't it? There's a myth right there and a legend in it.
He's another urban legend for you. There's a man in where is it? There's a Nigerian man somewhere with a room full of cash, just waiting for somebody to accept it from his emails. He keeps emailing people saying, "I want to give you money," but you know, there's one poor man there just trying to get rid of his money, and nobody will take it.
Ex-generals and all that type of stuff. Yeah, these guys are rich.
That's it.
No one pass it on to me.
That whole thing come about with the whole harvesting, the whole harvesting and mining of blood diamonds. You know, is that? I know it's Africa, it's not Nigeria, it's close, but you know, is it to do with that? Like,
have you ever seen that film with Leonardo DiCaprio about
Titanic?
Blood Diamond movie. Yeah.
The Blood Diamond movie. We're not talking about Titanic or or Wolf of Wall Street. Or again, some people might say a lot of that is mythology and stuff, but without going into details, a former relation of mine, as in somebody that was related by marriage, actually knew some of the people that were in the real life thing, and apparently a lot of what was happening in that film is very, very accurate. So that's just a little bit of something, you know. There's not really much urban legend that's actually very close to what really happened. So it's very interesting. But you know, you look, getting back to urban legends, because I said we weren't going to get sidetracked, and as usual we always get sidetracked. But urban legends, they come from all over the world, you know. They've all got different stories and different things like that, and they're just stories to help guide the young, and then the young pass these stories on to their young when they get older, and that's basically what an urban legend is, mate. Yeah.
Takes a drop in the ocean to create a tidal wave, right?
Pretty much.
And we also have to look, as you just said, Gary, that they're all around the world, and when things also get translated, they don't often have the same meaning. So they have to create a new area to put that in, or a new language, and yeah, so that it makes sense. But then it doesn't make sense, so it gets changed so it does in a different language.
And
so,
then you look at like civilizations that are very tribal based and things like that. Each individual tribe will have its own stories, different stories, and again, a lot of them are telling the same kind of thing from a different point of view, which to me is basically what religion is. They're all telling the same stories from a slightly different point of view. But I mean, take for instance, if you go to Hawaii, they talk about the night marches, and I don't know if you've ever heard about them. Now, this is an urban legend where what they say is at certain times the spirits of the old Hawaiian island warriors will march the island, protecting it, marching around, making sure everybody's safe. Now, they are not specifically evil, but apparently they do demand respect. If you ever have an encounter with one of these entities, the idea is keep your head down, just let them go past, do not acknowledge them other than bow your head. And they're known by, you'll hear a drum beat, boom, 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 and you'll start to see, those old wooden like tiki torches, a whole group come around the corner, which I suppose in this day and age could be any kind of group of people. You can do that if they wanted to, but they say if they come at you, the idea is lie down face first on the floor and just let them walk past. Do not acknowledge them and you'll be right. Don't look back. Once they're gone, get up and keep walking in the other direction. So I don't know what the basis behind that is, but that's specific to Hawaii. If you go to somewhere like Easter Island or any one of 1,000 countries, islands, whatever, you were going to get urban legends which are basically the same story told a little bit differently based on where they are, and then you're going to have urban legends which are very specific to that region, which won't come out anywhere else. So
it's cultural, isn't it?
It
becomes a cultural thing.
I mean, there are so many that we didn't
adaptation.
there are so many that we didn't even go into tonight. You've got the killer in the back seat. You've got the one of the girl that puts a hand down to pat the dog in a bed, and the dog's licking her hand and everything like that. And when she gets up in the morning, she finds that the dog's been torn to pieces and it's hanging around the house and stuff. And there's just this letter saying humans can lick too.
Yeah.
We actually
I'm so glad you shared that one.
There's just so many out there that we could do a 1,000 shows on different urban legends. That I think we've just about out of time for this one now. We're probably going to have to say goodbye in a sec. But
just
Gary, just want to jump on you with that one there.
Oh no, please don't.
What? There's the one where the dad walks into the bedroom and says hi to his son, and he notices something under the bed. So he crouches down and sees what's under the bed, and it's his son's under the bed. And his son's going, "There's someone scary on my bed." That's another urban legend that I've heard of as well.
Yeah.
Does that
that one just
the
actually
old boogeyman in the cupboard thing?
Right. The boogeyman in the cupboard.
Yeah.
I said your story just sent shivers. Actually, I don't know why. So we'll just
So touching on what you said before, Gary, about the cemetery with the 100 steps.
Yep.
Would you like to book plane tickets? I found where it is.
Where is it?
Have you?
Yes, I have.
Is it in Brazil, Indiana?
It is about halfway between Brazil and Terre Haute on the US 40, about 1.5 miles south of Cloverland.
Oh, so we actually have GPS coordinates.
Yes, so there's actually a sign at the front that says Cloverland 100 Steps Cemetery, closed dusk to dawn.
Oh.
It actually looks
That's an
really
invitation,
good.
isn't it? Yeah.
Because apparently there wasn't just ghost stories and tall tales, there was actually body snatchers as well that have been known to go through there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely want to go now.
Work of body snatchers. Yeah, there's a whole write-up about them. And another one of their urban legends or things that are supposedly supposed to happen, apart from being so sinister and seeing the Grim Reaper, is you'd go there on a night without the moon there, walk up, count your steps, walk backwards and count your steps, and you will have a different number.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that.
So, it's like, well, hey, that's just typical because you're not counting the step that you're standing on at the top, are you? People
is
say,
that a
is
trick,
it ghostly sleight of hand? Is it, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's just people not knowing how to count, because 0 is not a number.
No.
Yeah. Or I don't know.
And walking
But
backwards,
is
and
that their
tripping,
trick?
blah blah blah. Right?
But no, we
That
found
ghost
it's-
could make you make a trick. So if you can't count, and maybe they move the steps, maybe there's somebody there, another ghosty element comes in and takes a step away. But
We're
you're
creating
never
our
gonna
own
get
urban
there.
legend as we go now.
Yeah, we'll
Well,
have to go and
so
check
what
it
is it
out.
with things like this? They face west on a hill. Why is it anything
Ah.
to do with anything paranormal? It's facing west.
Well, isn't
I-
that because of the
I don't
sun
know.
setting?
You know, when I'm going to name a name here, but when we have visited the little church at Swanley,
Yep.
every single gravestone is engraved and faces one specific direction. There's one single grave that the engraving has been flipped the other way around. I know there is something specific about that. Apparently he might not have been a nice person or whatever. There's a reasoning behind it, but maybe that ties into what you're talking about, everything facing west.
Oh yeah, it's just.
I do know the significance in Aboriginal culture from West, but I don't know what it would be in ours.
Yeah. Anyway, we are going to have to cut it this one now because we are out of
we have
time.
to?
So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you guys. It's been awesome, and I'm pretty sure we can get this group together for another one real soon.
So it's weird.
Thanks
how
for
the
having
first
us.
20 minutes is like but you get to the end, and you're like, we should just keep talking.
Exactly. Exactly. The first few minutes are always, we've got to get this thing going, and then before you know it, you just can't shut anybody up. So, anyway,
I'm quite now.
if everybody can say goodbye, we're going to fly.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Yeah.
See you next time, peeps.
Keep it spooky.
Oh, I pushed my button and my button didn't work. Oh, I pushed the wrong button. See yous.